Good afternoon, teacher.
Okay. We are a bit late, but it's better to be late than never. I had some other engagements that could not allow me to be there early enough. So in our last lesson, we had reached a stage where we had talked about the digestion. We had completed the process of digestion, and we said they finally take place. The final place where it takes place is the stomach. I mean, it's the ileum, with a number of enzymes that are involved. Almost every enzyme now is available there. We have the intestinal juice that contains the enzymes, trypsin, maltase. It has enzymes, lipase. It has enzyme sucrase, those of galactase. The lactases are all present there because they now finally digest all the foods into final products. And remember, the final product of digestion of carbohydrates is glucose. If it is starch, it is glucose. If it is maybe in fruits, like in sugars, like the common sugar we have is glucose and fructose. If it is in milk, is glucose and galactose. And then for proteins is amino acids. Amino acids is the final product of digestion of protein. We also said that the final or the end product of digestion of fats and oils, or fats and lipids generally, is fatty acids and glycerols. Now, once they are formed in our stomach, then they need to undergo a process we call absorption. And we said that absorption is the process by which soluble products of digestion diffuse through cellular lining of the villi into the bloodstream. And then we said that the villi is located in the small intestine. Remember, I told you the smallest intestine is divided into three parts. There is the duodenum, then there is the jejunum, and then there is the ileum. But it is this long part of the small intestines where absorption takes place. And we also talked about adaptation of the small intestine that aids it in the process of absorption. One of them, we said they has numerous villi, which increases the surface area. Another one, we said it is very long, about 6 to 7 meters long, which means that food takes a lot of time there. Then number 3, we said it is supplied by a dense network of blood capillaries that you can see. And that also aids us in removing any food that diffuses inside the blood vessels, can be transported to the rest of the body. We also say that it contains lacteals, and lacteals are very useful for the absorption of fatty acids and glycerol. And we are saying even the villi are numerous. There are too many. That means that if there are many, then they can also absorb a lot of food at the same time. And we also say that even the villi itself is divided into smaller units called finger-like units, that is called microvilli. The microvilli further increases the surface area. Now, we talked about that absorption. I think we finished, and we talked about adaptation of the villi, which I have just talked about, that it has a thin epithelium which allows for easy diffusion. Actually, we are going to talk about more about this when we discuss about transport in plants and in animals. This adaptation will be very important, especially the transport of food. Then we are also saying that it is highly supplied with the blood vessels, which means that food can be carried away the moment it is dissolved in it. Then we are saying it has lacteals, which now absorb fatty acids and glycerols, and microvilli, which increases the surface area. But also, we talked about the small intestines. This should be small intestines, not large. The small intestines, which we commonly call the ileum. So the small intestines also has numerous adaptations. One is that it is highly folded and therefore very long, about 6 to 7 meters, which allows for maximum absorption. Food takes a long time. As it moves, they keep on absorbing, so that whatever you are ingesting or removing out as feces contains little or completely no food. Then it has a thin layer of cells to reduce the diffusion distance so that soluble food substances can easily move through. And then we are saying they are highly supplied with blood capillaries and lacteals that transport away any dissolved food. Therefore, it maintains a steep diffusion gradient, meaning that food will always be moving towards the blood. And then it has a finger-like projection called the villi, which increases the surface area. And yet that villi is also divided into microvilli, which further increases the surface area for absorption of food. So that is absorption. But then we are saying after absorption, just like I told you, that in the process of digestion, we start with ingestion, taking food in the mouth. We go with digestion, which includes both mechanical and or physical digestion and chemical digestion. Remember, chemical digestion requires enzymes, which are biological chemicals. Then after digestion, there is absorption, which we have already discussed, and we are saying absorption takes place in the small intestine because of the presence of the villi with those characteristics that we talk about. Now, after absorption, then how is food used in the body? And that is what we are calling the assimilation. Assimilation is defined as the process by which absorbed food materials are built up into complex constituents of an organism. Some I've told you can be used as source of energy for body metabolism, like the process of respiration requires some of these foods. The process of growth and repair requires some of this food. Locomotion, movement, all this requires. Even respiration, even, by the way, including reproduction, all of them require some of these foods that is absorbed, and we normally call them the essential minerals. Like proteins, we call it an essential amino acids, those ones which can be got from the diet that we take. Now, how does assimilation take place? Now, for each final product, remember, the question may be set that you discuss how the assimilation and metabolism of glucose takes place. Remember, glucose is the final product of digestion of carbohydrates. And like I've told you, the common carbohydrates we talk about in the O level is starch, because cellulose cannot be digested by animals. So when we're talking about digestion of cellulose, then we don't talk about it in human beings because we are non-ruminants. But ruminants like cows, goats, sheep, all of them can digest cellulose, which we are also going to look at very briefly. Now, we are saying what happens when glucose is absorbed. Remember, the final product of digestion of starch is glucose. So if the glucose has reached the small intestine and then it is absorbed, what then happens to it? Now we are saying that one, this glucose is taken into the bloodstream, then it is broken in within our cells, because this glucose diffuses inside the cell by process of diffusion, so that once it reaches there, it is broken down to carbon dioxide and water. And then energy is released, and that energy is used for a variety of body functions. So the first process of assimilation of glucose is that it is broken down in the process of respiration, and it provides the energy that the body requires for many metabolic processes. I've given you an example of metabolic process is movement or locomotion, is even digestion itself is a metabolic process. Reproduction is a metabolic process. Growth and development is a metabolic process. So once this energy are derived, now that means that carbohydrates becomes the fuel with which the body needs to perform all other functions. Then what happens, because the body does not need all this. I have always told you that when you are feeding, the amount of food you require is measured by a fist. When you fold your hands, your fingers, that size of your finger becomes the amount of food that you need. by the way, for a period of 24 hours, meaning that any food that you take beyond that is wasted, especially when it is glucose. Now, what happens when you have that excess glucose, which is digested and removed? Then the body stores it in form of glycogen, which is an equivalent of starch in plants. So glycogen is actually an animal starch. So that means that if you've eaten too much food, the balance is going to be stored in the liver. Remember, the liver is the main organ for assimilation of carbohydrates. So that glycogen can actually be given back in times of starvation. And that's why I've also said a human being can spend as long as 21 days without eating if you've been eating well. And then you will not still die, although you'll get starved, but you can still survive. Why? Because a lot of glycogen is stored in our liver. And in case there is deficiency, you don't eat, then the body is capable of releasing that glucose at the time of starving. By the way, members, this explains why as you're approaching lunchtime, you feel like you are too hungry. But then if you miss the food, for example, you'll find that you will keep on staying, but by the time you reach 4 or 5 in the evening, you even forget that you've not eaten lunch. The reason is that glucose that is stored in your liver is then broken, the glycogen is broken back to glucose, which actually is used by the body. And then the brain feels as if there is adequate nutrient, and therefore you don't even think about hunger anymore, meaning that there is adequate glucose that is running through your brain. So that is the process of assimilation. Remember, it starts with breaking down, then the balance that remains is converted and stored as glycogen in the liver. And then it is only released at the time when you starve. Unfortunately, if you don't do a lot of physical exercises and you are eating all the time and there is a lot of glucose, then this glycogen will not be used. And this glycogen may develop actually a lot of fats and some form of lipids in your tissues, which might result into you becoming very big in size and sometimes causes the blocking of the blood vessels, resulting into high blood pressure. So that means that you must eat what your body can consume, the excess of which can be stored but to a certain extent, but can be again remetabolized into other forms that now connects to the tissues, and then it results into deposit of fats in our blood vessels, and then eventually narrowing of the blood vessel, resulting into high blood pressure. Now, what about proteins? Remember, proteins are in form of amino acids. It has two sides. It has an amino group. Amino group is NH3. Let me try to show you the structure. Now, we have amino group, and then we have the carboxylic acid groups. But usually what happens is that amino acids are eventually used in protein synthesis, in the building up of regulators, protein regulators like enzymes, like hormones. Some of them are even used in the building of new, broken, and worn out tissues, like new cells during cell division. Then we are also saying that amino acids are used in body growth and in the repair of, in body growth and repair of worn out tissues. And then we are saying in case glucose and fats are not there, these amino acids are deaminated. They remove amino group and the balance is actually used as a source of energy or as for respiration. But then we are saying once it is deaminated, then that amino group that is removed together in form of urea, and it is passed through the kidney and then the urine. Now, that means that in protein, 3 things happen. One, it can be used in the synthesis of new proteins, especially regulators like hormones, like enzymes. Then 2, they are used for producing new cells, which is used in body growth and repair of worn out tissues. 3, we are saying that in case there is no glucose, you have not eaten those energy-giving foods, this excess protein can be deaminated. They remove amino acid group, then the other carbon skeleton group is used or is broken down during the process of respiration to release the energy. Those are 3 main functions. But now, once it is deaminated, because remember, proteins are very toxic. They are very deadly in the cell. So they need to remove amino acid. That amino acid is removed in form of urea. It is passed in the urine and then sometimes in our sweat, such that that protein is not stored in the body. Remember, glucose is stored, amino acids are deaminated, and that's why we don't need too much proteins, because the unused protein are not stored. The unused protein must be converted into a less harmful form. And therefore, you deaminate it and then you excrete it or remove it either in sweat or in our urine in form of urea. Now, deamination is the removal of amino acid group from amino acids. So this one here is used to form urea, which is actually a toxic waste product of body metabolism. What about fatty acids and glycerol? Remember, there are three major types. We have glucose for starch. We have amino acids for members. Amino acids come from
proteins.
From proteins. Then what is the end product of lipids or fats?
Fatty acids and glycerol.
Fatty acids and glycerol. So how are these assimilated or used in the body? So we are saying the first substance which is taken to release energy is glucose. If there is no glucose, then there is deamination of proteins, and then it is also used. But in case there is no glucose and proteins, then we use the fatty acids. And they are also oxidized or broken down to release what? Energy. So that means that fats and lipids are also part of the energy-giving foods. But the truth is that fats and lipids are released very slowly, and yet they have a very high energy content. The highest amount of energy is found in fats and in lipids. By the way, that explains why in most cases when someone eats a lot of fatty foods, that person becomes too easy, because it takes a lot of energy to break the fats that you have. You find you are so dizzy, you are so sleepy, there's a way you don't feel very comfortable because it contains a high energy content and a lot of energy is required to unlock the bond that is between them. Then the excess of those fats are used for body insulation, like the one that we have in our skin called subcutaneous fats. So they are deposited at the surface of your skin, which prevent heat loss from the body, and therefore it is important for temperature regulation. Then lipids are also used in formation of structures like cell membranes. Sometimes when you upgrade, you'll find that your cell membrane is made as a phospholipid granule. Phospholipids mean that it contains some of the lipids, which makes up the cell wall or the cell membrane of many organisms. Then excess fats and glycerol are stored under your skin in form of what we call adipose tissue, which means that fats are rarely wasted. But of course, when you take too much of it, it is deposited on your under your skin, it is deposited in your blood vessels, and then eventually may result into having high blood pressure. Now, all these processes we are talking about takes place in the liver. Now, I want you to discuss this question. I want you to discuss this question that we have, which should guide us. I hope you are able to see the question.
Yes.
Members, are you seeing the question?
Yes.
Let me enlarge a bit.
Yes.
Okay. Now, differentiate between absorption and assimilation. Cynthia, what is the difference between absorption and assimilation? Maya, if Cynthia is still looking for the answer.
I,
Yes, Maya?
I think absorption is the process by which soluble food nutrients are taken into the body, into the bloodstream through
Through the what? Okay, that is correct. Faith, Mugoya, what is assimilation?
The assimilation is the process by which I have not yet understood assimilation. I know only absorption.
What is absorption?
Absorption is the process by which soluble products of digestion diffuse through the villi into the bloodstream.
Okay. Now, when we talk about assimilation, we are talking about how is that absorbed food used? So it is the process by which the end products of digestion after absorption is utilized in the body. Just like I've told you what happens to the end product of carbohydrates, the end product is glucose. What happens to glucose? It is broken down to release energy. Those that are not broken down are converted to glycogen and stored in the body, which is released during the time of starvation. That is assimilation. The process by which soluble food products absorbed in the bloodstream are utilized in the body is assimilation, while absorption is a process by which soluble products of digestion are taken into the bloodstream through the villi, and then they move into the tissues and the cells that we need. Okay, state the end products of digestion of carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids. This one here, everyone should be able to give. Esther, what is the end product of digestion of carbohydrates? Is Esther here? Okay, Cynthia. Cynthia, are you there? Can someone tell us the end product of digestion of carbohydrates?
Glucose.
Glucose. Protein.
amino acids.
Amino acids.
Okay. Fats and lipids.
Fatty acid, glycerol.
Fatty acid and glycerol. Okay, now the next question is describe how the products of assimilation of the products of the following takes place in the body of human. Carbohydrates. How is carbohydrates assimilated into the body of humans?
Can I try for carbohydrates?
Yes.
First, the glucose is broken down in the process of respiration. It's broken down into glucose in the process of respiration. This is to provide energy for the body's metabolism. Then the excess glucose is stored in the body as glycogen.
Where does it take place? Huh?
Not sure.
You're not sure? Maya? I thought we said that it takes place in the liver, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes. So you can, when you are describing, you also talk about where it is assimilated from. Of course, it flows. You are going to see that direction of flow when we look at transport in humans. Okay, what about the end products of proteins? How are they assimilated in the body? Hey, Faith, what has happened today? You are not active.
Okay, let me try.
Yes, that is what I want.
The amino acids. The amino acids are used in the synthesis of the new plants, especially they are regulators of the hormones and enzymes. Then there are some amino acids which are used in the body's growth and to repair the worn out tissues of the body.
Yes.
Then when the excess amino acids, the excess ones, they are not stored in the liver. Instead, they are removed in form of sweat, urine. Yeah, that's what I know.
That is good. Can somebody add on that? Okay, we had said once proteins are broken down, they give us amino acids. These amino acids are taken into the bloodstream through the villi once they reach the liver. Now, some are used in the production of protein regulators like hormones, like amino acids, like the plasmas. All of them are those protein regulators. Now, others are then used in the building of new cells that will replace the worn out cells within the tissue. So they're actually used in repair of worn out tissues. Like when you get an injury, it can cause the clotting of the blood. Also, as a prothrombin protein, when you, let's say in the process of bathing, sometimes you brush yourself and remove so many cells. They replace those. That's why you bathe every day, you don't get thin. Sometimes you get a cut or a wound. Where do you think those new cells come to seal that or to cause the healing? They all come from the food that we eat in form of amino acids. Then we are saying, since they cannot be stored in the liver, they are very toxic. They are very dangerous. Then they undergo a process we call deamination. Please mark the word deamination because it is a biological term. Deamination means removal of the amino group from an amino acid in form of urea. And that urea is removed either in urine or in sweat. So we say these amino acids are deaminated. Then the balance can be used in producing energy, or they are also converted into glycogen and stored. Remember, once the amino acids are removed, then now that amino group removed is then converted into urea, and that urea is removed as a waste product in terms of urea in our urine or in our sweat. Then the fats and lipids, we have said once they are eaten, they are broken down into fatty acids and glycerol. Then of course, fatty acids are very useful that they are insulators. They protect our body because they form a covering of the body, especially under our skins, such that they regulate the temperature, they prevent heat loss. We are saying part of it in form of fatty acid is also broken down to release the energy during respiration, and they produce more energy during respiration. So it is important for us to know if someone ate the food containing starch, can you tell us elaborately everything that happens? What happens to that starch that somebody has eaten? Now, I am giving you an example. A question may be set as, give an account of nutrition on carbohydrates or starch. Give an account of the events that happen when a person eats portion. Now that when they say give an account, it means that you tell us everything that happens in portion. First of all, portion is taken into the mouth by the process of digestion. What happens in the mouth? In the mouth, two forms of digestion takes place. There is physical digestion, where food is chewed, broken into smaller pieces, mixed with the saliva, and softened and rolled into a bolus. That is called physical digestion. At the same time, in your mouth, what happens is that the food formed, the arrival of food stimulates your salivary gland to release saliva, which contains an enzyme, salivary amylase. That salivary amylase then hydrolyzes the starch in the mouth, breaking it down to maltose under neutral conditions. Then once the food is rolled into the bolus, that food is swallowed by the process called peristalsis, which is a rhythmic contraction of the walls of our what? Our esophagus. Now the food then reaches the stomach. Remember, it has portion, meaning that it has starch. In the stomach, no digestion takes place. Why? Because the stomach is acidic, and that acidity stops the action of enzyme salivary amylase. Secondly, it does not have any digestive enzyme that breaks down starch. So from here, it is only mixed with the gastric juice to soften it, and then food is pushed to the duodenum, the arrival of food. Actually, we are going to talk about that elaborately when we return from